Hello, and welcome to your third lecture on the UAS safety culture that we would like to have at Warren Community College. This is for your course, UAS 106, Safety and Security in UAS Operations. What we're going to go over today is, what is the Warren safety culture and why is it important to develop one? When we talk about remote pilot in command, what does this really mean? What's a VO? How about the person manipulating the controls? What role does autonomy play in our safety culture? We kind of started to begin on that when we were talking about what Skydio is promoting right now. What is an air boss? And what do they do to standardize risk? What does it mean to be a professional? We'll go back to the human factors that affect UAS operations, and we'll return with a little more discussion on aeronautical decision making. Let's talk about the Warren safety culture, if you will. Basically, we have a mission statement to this effect that we attempt daily to live up to in our UAS operations. Warren County Community College is committed to a safety-based culture. As a college relatively new to aviation, an emphasis on safety is a competitive advantage over other UAS programs that are going to emphasize technology and equipment over your professionalism as a pilot. The well-being and safety of our students, faculty, and staff is of paramount importance. Safety is an area that requires deliberate effort and a conscious commitment on the part of everyone in order to make a positive difference. Therefore, we pledge that no punitive action will be taken against any individual for reporting a safety hazard or a safety concern. And let me speak as the college president that I'm committed and look forward to working alongside each of you, taking this course and in our UAS program to ensure the safest environment we collectively can achieve. We want to be as safe as possible. We want to make safety the forefront of our program. We want anyone who hires you to know that they've just hired one of the safest unmanned aircraft system pilots on the planet. That's the goal. So what are our safety objectives? To support the education and promotion of safety throughout every function of the college that will continue to result in a strong safety culture that fosters safe practices, encourages effective safety reporting, and encourages communication about safety. The only way for us to maintain a safety culture that we want to achieve is for you, the student, and we, the faculty, to work together to find risks that we have not mitigated yet, to realize practices that could be done safer, and to implement those practices. So our safety culture is a living, breathing part of who we are as a community working in the unmanned systems environment. All faculty, staff, and students have the duty and responsibility to perform their duties and activities in the safest practical manner. Warren is dedicated to maintaining a confidential employee reporting system to report all hazards, accidents, incidents, and safety issues without any fear of reprisal. So when we talk about general aviation risk management principles that are adhered to for safety risk management, there are these things. We need to develop and maintain a safety culture that recognizes the value of safety management systems. And this is something you're going to want to do when you go out into the workforce. You're going to want to implement safety management systems within your domain of influence so that whatever UAS operations you're involved in, maintain this high level of safety. We want to clearly define duties, responsibilities, and accountabilities for you, the students, and we, the employees. Unlike many academic disciplines, we constantly have to test ourselves. We have to be retested and maintain our Part 107. We have to be retested and maintain our trusted operator status with AUVSI. We are constantly looking at our safety practices, even from an instructional level. So we're in this together. A lot of times we teach you something from a textbook, and then we kind of explain the best practices. Here, we're involved together in modeling the best practices as a community involved in robotics in the unmanned systems industry. We want to provide all employees and students with adequate training and information to enhance performance. So just like you going through this class, we as faculty and professionals will be going through either classes with other universities like Embry-Riddle or classes with webinars, and professional development. So it's a constant upgrading of the skills and working to understand what will make the safest environment. We want to comply or exceed, and in fact, we want to exceed all regulatory specific requirements. We want to proactively manage risks associated with our operation. We standardize this risk management as part of our SMS so that all our aviation operations go through the same planning, the same process, the same checklists. So there's deliberate and strategic risk assessment constantly going on. We want to ensure all externally supplied services and materials meet or exceed the regulatory and agency-specific requirements of unmanned systems. We want to set defined performance goals and consistently measure those ourselves against those goals. We want to be upgrading and constantly improving. That's part of our safety culture. We do conduct internal management and safety reviews to improve performance. And just in October 2020, our last one, Embry-Riddle, Joe Serrata from Embry-Riddle helped us. And I know that a number of you got to meet him at that time. We want to encourage all employees to report errors and safety issues in an environment of open, honest, and non-punitive trust where safety is the only objective. If you're telling me as your instructor that you see what I'm doing can be done better and safer and enhance our safety culture, I want to hear it. I want to be better. And this is what we want you to do as students. We want you to be craving the opportunity to be a safer pilot in the National Airspace System. That starts with you and your crew. So as the remote pilot in command, you must be designated before or during the flight of the small unmanned aircraft, according to section 107.19. Remember, part 107 is all about 107. So there's many subsections in there. The remote pilot in command is directly responsible for and is the final authority as to the operation of the small unmanned aircraft system. If I'm standing next to you and I'm your instructor, but you hold a Part 107 and you are designated for that operation or even that educational activity as the remote pilot in command, during that time, you're in command, okay? I am not in command. I may have an educational oversight responsibility for you, but you are the responsible party. The remote pilot in command must ensure that small unmanned aircraft will pose no undue hazard to other people, other aircraft, or other property in the event of a loss of control of the aircraft for any reason. Think about that. That is a major responsibility because you are responsible to make sure no one is hurt in flying unmanned aircraft. And so that means setting your return to homes. It means learning your application, your flight control system. It means really developing an innate knowledge of the flight control system, the ground control station of any UAS you're working with so that you can avoid an accident. It also means mitigating your risk beforehand. So an example of an epic fail by someone who didn't mitigate their risks would be here. And it's in your class videos. There is a California man who thinks his $20,000 fine and fees are unfair after his drone took off from one of the casinos in Las Vegas and landed on an active runway at McCarran International Airport during a visit by the President of the United States, who at that time, Donald Trump. In fact, in the caption accompanying the video he posted to YouTube of the flight from the Las Vegas Strip to McCarran, he had a flyaway with a Phantom 3. He suggests the Secret Service took control of his drone. The drone was intercepted by the Secret Service. Even after showing it was a system failure, I was still fined $15,000, he wrote. With the late fees accruing from the FAA violation notice, the total has risen at the time of we were making this to $20,000. And he had not heard from the Secret Service. Well, the Secret Service and the FAA are two different federal agencies. And what his fine was, now he may face other kinds of charges later for endangering a VIP during a TFR. because he shouldn't have been flying at that time, given the location of the casino he took off from McCarran. There's absolutely no way that drone should have even been turned on during that time period. So that may be another issue he has to deal with. But here's what I'm going to tell you. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter if it's a system failure. He's in the wrong. He had bad practices. He had bad procedures. He didn't go through his control checks. He didn't make sure his drone was safe. He was flying over people in the first place. He violated so many rules in the video that you saw that actually, I would argue his fine was really, really lenient considering it, because he knew what he is. He's in charge of that drone. He's in command, and he did not command it effectively. The remote pilot in command must ensure the small UAS operation complies with all applicable thing. So if your drone takes off and flies over streets, flies over cars, flies over people, that's on you. You are the pilot. You are in command. There are mitigating strategies within every UAS application, flight control application, that could have prevented that. Okay, now when you fly for us, you'll also notice that when we fly Phantom 3s, they're always tethered to the ground. These things have all kinds of issues. But it doesn't take long to realize that the issues are there. And it takes even less time to mitigate that risk in the first place. Taking off from a casino to go fly around an active Ferris wheel is not a safe operation, especially for an untrained pilot. Now, there may be people who do that with proper mitigations, with waivers to fly over people, with the permission of the property owner, with the idea of doing marketing for the casinos. But I'm going to tell you, there's going to be a lot of people involved, a lot of visual observers, a lot of people making sure. There are so many violations here. The remote pilot in command must have the ability to direct the small unmanned aircraft to ensure compliance. So it's your responsibility. You don't get to say, computer malfunction. Sorry that I started a machine. It had a computer malfunction. I didn't set a return to home and a signal loss. And I didn't do all my mitigations that I was supposed to. And someone got hurt really bad. But it's not my fault. It is your fault. We have to change. Our safety culture, follows these regulations. If something goes wrong in the operation of unmanned aircraft and you are the remote pilot in command, it is your fault. No blame game. No blaming anybody else. You had the power to stop that from happening. You will learn from us. Let me give you some thoughts from our attorney, Jonathan Ruprecht, when it comes to this. You should keep in mind that the responsibility of the remote pilot in command is like being in a gutter or in a sewer of a major city. If any trash or garbage happens, it will flow down on your head. You should be careful who you fly with. You should be careful who your crew is. You should be careful what you're doing in unmanned system operations. There is no reason in 2020 that you cannot, or by 2020, I should say, by the year 2020, the control systems have gotten sophisticated enough that I wouldn't rely solely on autonomy like Skydio suggests, but the emergence of autonomous safety measures coupled with human precautions and checklists can mitigate risk almost to a non-consequential level. But if you fail to do any of those steps, you fail to take safety seriously, then you're going to have issues. So as an RPIC, watch the videos this week on YouTube. And I want you to say every video you watch, and there's a number of them that are in your syllabus and on your LMS or My Warren, analyze that flight in and of itself. What did that pilot do wrong? What did that pilot do right once they realized they had done something wrong? Because you can recover from a mistake, and that's part of your training. And what we hope to embed in your thinking is things are going to happen, but you can always be calm, you can always maintain control, and you can always do the proper steps to mitigate an incident or an accident. Will there be things that happen? There will always be something that happens, but you have to be able to demonstrate and illustrate that you took all the proper steps in the first place. Let's talk about who's the person manipulating the controls. Well, here's it is. It's 107.12, the requirement for a remote pilot certificate with a small UAS rating. Except As provided in paragraph C of this section, no person may manipulate the flight controls of an unmanned aircraft system unless that person has a remote pilot certificate with a small UAS rating. In other words, they passed their 107. Or that person is under the direct supervision of a remote pilot in command, and the remote pilot in command has the ability to immediately take direct control of the flight of the unmanned aircraft system. Okay? So, person manipulating control can't be 100 yards away from you. You don't have the ability to immediately take direct control. You can't be watching them on skyward. You cannot take the immediate control. All right? So you need to be right there with that person. So they're almost, think of them as attached to your hip. You have visual observers to watch. You can't run out and be a visual observer and say, I was in command, but I didn't fly. All right? You need to be there. You need to have the skill set to take over that drone and to mitigate any risk to the national airspace system. Even when there's a person manipulating the controls and you're not holding the controls or you're not working the ground control station, you are still in command. Remote pilot in charge? No. Remote pilot in control? No. Remote pilot in command? Yes. You are always in command. As a remote pick, remember, under Part 107, you must obtain that pilot certificate with a UAS rating issued by the FAA prior to UAS operations. So you know this. If you're going to make $1 or post YouTube videos, you have to have the remote pilot certificate. The remote pick must have this certificate easily accessible during flight operations. You have to be able to show it to somebody. Guidance regarding the certification is found in Chapter 6, Part 107, Subpart C, Remote Pilot Certification, in your remote pilot study guide and in the remote pilot regulations. Again, the remote pilot in command will have the final authority and responsibility for everything. The person manipulating the controls is not at fault. You're at fault. You're in command. You're always in charge. Remember that you can also transfer control of a UAS between two certified pilots. Two or more certified remote pilots can transfer to each other and may do so only if they're both can maintain visual line of sight of the unmanned aircraft, unless you have a waiver, and without loss of control. All right, so you can't set it down on a table, walk away, and then somebody else come up and get it and say, you fly it now. You must be handing it over intentionally, and we have policies and procedures in the manuals you should be reading. You will be tested on them, and you would say, your aircraft, you're in charge now. You must positively communicate that you've given over control. Everyone on the crew must know that the new remote pilot in command. All right? And you have to meet those requirements of Part 107, including, even though you may have not originally done those checklists, the pre-flight checklists, the operational checklist, the flight area surveys that we require, you should be intimately familiar with how they were filled out and what they said. You should not take over someone else's aircraft if you don't know this. So the person manipulating the flight controls is a person who does not hold a remote pilot certificate or a remote pilot that has not yet met recurrent testing and training. Remember, you have to go through it every 2 years. And you cannot operate under 107 as long as you're directly supervised. So some people do this. They don't take the test again, and they fulfill that role. And there's some fine print there that you can press pause on and read to yourself. I'm not going to read it. But remember, there's a couple of methods there for making sure how you go through those passing of the control. The ability to take control is necessary to ensure that the remote pilot can quickly address any hazardous situation before an accident occurs. The ability of the remote pick to immediately take over the flight controls could be achieved using a number of different methods, which we illustrated on the last slide. But for example, the operation could involve a buddy box type system that uses two control stations, two remote controls, One for the person manipulating the flight controls, and one for the remote pilot that allows the remote pilot to immediately take over control of the aircraft and to silence the person manipulating the control. Another method could involve the remote pick standing close enough to the person, like I said, attached to your hip, so as to physically take over the controls. And a third method could be an automated system. So, hit the button, put it in loiter. Hit the button, put it in a return to home autonomous feature. Grab the control. That'll give you a little bit of time. So there's 3 example methods you could use. We talked a little bit in the last video about Skydio saying, well, we have so much autonomy, you don't even need experience or training and you can save yourself a lot of money. Great idea, right? Bad idea. Here's what we're saying. Autonomous operation is generally considered an operation in which a remote pilot inputs a flight plan into the ground control station. This sends it to an autopilot microcontroller chip. Pixhawk would be an example of one. A common Raspberry Pi might be another one. Sends the autopilot aboard the small unmanned aircraft. During the automated flight, flight control inputs are made by components on board the aircraft. In other words, by the computer microprocessor, not from the control station. Thus, the remote pick could lose the control link to your aircraft, and the aircraft would still fly a pre-programmed mission and return home to land. During automated flight, the remote pick must also have the ability to change the routing, the altitude. Think about if a plane comes in, and command the aircraft to land immediately. The ability to direct the small UA may be through manual manipulation of the flight controls or through other commands using automation. So, in a Phantom 4, if we had that up with Pix 4D, we could hit the toggle switch from GPS mode to attitude mode and back. That'll immediately cease us autonomous operations and return control to the remote control in your hand. Now, with something like the EBX, which is done on a computer, then you would go into either a loiter mode or you might go into an emergency landing mode through touching a couple buttons on the computer, but that would not be the same as moving the sticks around. So you have to keep this in mind and know what your precautions are. Have your procedures worked out. Plan for an emergency in advance. I can't tell you how many times we've been out there flying over the years. We'll fly something like the Wingtra or the EBX, which has a lot less physical manipulation of controls. And for some reason, a small pilot aircraft, a single pilot aircraft, seems to always come and want to take a look at what that thing flying around is. So we have to be ready at all times for even curiosity that is not healthy for the pilot and the manned aircraft sometimes. But who's responsible? We're responsible, and you have to think of that. The Skydio doesn't know how to land itself, and if something is flying at it fast enough, it doesn't have the speed and capability to get out of the way. So this idea that, don't worry, we have such good autonomy, that's a fool's errand. I would not run down that rabbit hole anytime in my life. The remote pick must retain the ability to direct the small UAA to ensure compliance with the requirements of Part 107. There are a number of different methods that a remote pick can utilize, all right, to ensure. For example, you may transmit a command for the autonomous aircraft to ascend or climb, descend. You can send a command, land now. You can send a command, proceed to a new waypoint. You can enter an orbit pattern or a loiter pattern. You can do return to home. Or you may just crash that thing because you know what? The drone is not as important as a human life. Any of these methods can be used satisfactorily to avoid a hazard and give the right of way. The use of automation does not allow a person to simultaneously operate more than one small unmanned aircraft. We're not there yet. Our systems aren't good enough yet. You remain in command the entire time. Here's from drone2.com. I always like this one. There's many of them out there. People are trying to explain autonomous levels. From level 0, no automation, constantly on the sticks or some kind of manipulation control on a ground control station. Low automation, all right, drone has control of at least one of its functions. This is, the IMU or the compass. One of these would be an example. A level 2, drone can take over heading, altitude under certain conditions, so some obstacle avoidance. Level 3, the drone can perform all functions given certain conditions. So PIX4D or the wing tris control functions are examples of this. High automation, drone has backup systems so that if one fails, the platform will still be operational. Most of our drones probably aren't there at this point. And full automation, which is AI, which is the claim, that the flight can learn the drone. We're not there yet. The remote pilot in command still needs to maintain command. All right, so full automation, the drone controls itself under all circumstances with no expectation of human intervention. Full-time automation, this is how you're going to get the drone delivery. There are no examples of such drone yet, and they're not currently in production. You'll see examples, UPS, Amazon, they'll show it, but they haven't put them to the test. They haven't let people like us, researchers, get our hands on it and say, hey, let's see if this actually will be effective. They're working through those processes, but we're not there yet. However, what they are expected to do is use artificial intelligence tools to plan their flights. In other words, autonomous learning systems with the ability to modify a routine or behavior. Imagine if one day it's built and tasked with monitoring sharks on a coastline. Each day the drone monitors the coastline, but most often there are problems with a certain area of the flight path. And so the drone will acquire that knowledge, monitor that area, and then figure out what it should do. We're not there yet. And yet, a couple reasons why we're not. Number one, it's not legal. And number two, to say you don't need experience, you don't need training. Our drone's so good. I don't even understand this again, because even at that level of autonomy, you as the remote pilot in command, whether it's regulated or not, and this is one of those areas we will talk about exceeding regulations, must be planning a mission of that type and the level of autonomy you have and mitigating any risks that can go wrong with autonomy. AI can have problems. Even the human brain, think about it. How many people do you know? They're not always there, right? Legal autonomy, what we can do and what we can't with the Skydio as an example. And we talked about this in the last video. Is it wise to market a product over safety practices? Nothing will take the place of the remote pilot in command. Nothing will take the place of a safety culture. Nothing will take the place of a flight operations manual. Nothing will take the place of a safety management system. Even if artificial intelligence comes into being, there will still be human factors that have to be moved in. When we're flying around and we have multiple drones in the air, just like in manned aviation, there should be an air boss. Air bosses are individuals responsible for deconflicting demonstrations and multi-ship UAS operations. The role of an air boss can be a great assistance to the remote pilot and their teams, as it allows you as the remote pilot to concentrate on safe flying and team coordination. An air boss can deal with people around you, security issues, or other elements. The air boss conducts themselves with the same principles of professionalism that we do as pilots. And the air boss has to take it to a whole other level because they have multiple pilots in a confined area and we need to make it safe. While each pick has responsibility for the safety of their own flight, the air boss provides guidance and assistance and is the ultimate authority for an overall multi-ship flight operation or multi-flight crews participating in one flight operation. The air boss can be tasked with monitoring the flight operation in real time, the spectator movements and behavior, security breaches, potential hazards, incoming around the flight zone or control areas, approaching weather, loose or unsecured equipment, approaching aircraft. Therefore, to be effective, an air boss should be involved in a key participant of the preparation, organization, and management of the flight operation they are being the air boss for. And we train you on how to be an air boss. It's not quite that simple. You just don't get Part 107 and you say, okay, well, I've flown 20 hours, so now I'm an air boss. It doesn't work that way. An air boss is an individual who has been nominated and authorized to perform this function in connection with UAS flight demonstration. For consideration to be an air boss at Warren, the following requirements are recommended. They're actually required. You have to achieve a minimum of AUVSI Trusted Operator Program Level 3 certification. So you have to be a top 3 pilot. You have to demonstrate knowledge in the use and application of Airbus safety guidance and procedures and checklists. You have to demonstrate knowledge in the use of the Airbus checklist. You have to demonstrate knowledge in the management of spectators. It's not quite so easy when you're dealing with people. And you have to have the demonstrated ability to interpret information that will provide real-time safety information to the crew, weather apps, radio communications, radio frequency spectrum analyzation, all of these elements. An air boss has roles and responsibilities to think on their feet and openly and effectively communicate. The following skills and knowledge are recommended. So those are the requirements. Here's what we recommend. Air boss should be able to demonstrate knowledge in the use of the air boss recommended safety guidance. The air boss should be able to use the air boss checklist effectively. The air boss should be able to and demonstrate an ability to deal with spectators. And finally, they should have ability to interpret information that, again, gives that safety information to the crew. In your LMS, you'll find the AUVSI Top Operator Air Boss Checklist, which we adhere to. And so we would go through this in a multi-ship operation. A couple of things that are on the checklist. Number one, do we have the appropriate insurance for all the aircraft that we're flying? And the air boss would need to check that. When it comes to UAS remote pilots, observers, and safety personnel, are they appropriately licensed? Okay. Are they qualified and experienced? Do they have? If is it all new people? You probably shouldn't have multi-ship operations. The Airbus will check their top operator certification and ensure that they're in compliance. The Airbus identify professional observers and safety assistants and help with the briefing and debriefing of those people. They need to be at a minimum a remote pilot. Observers are fit for duty, feeling well, not fatigued, so the air boss can assess the I am safe part of it. And they have to identify property safety manager and include them in their safety review and have the appropriate cell phone numbers on task for emergency services. Aircraft UAS, they have to confirm that all of them are registered under Part 107 and that's the right aircraft that you said you were going to use. They confirm that the communications, the C2 link integrity and allocation is there, so there isn't radio interference. They confirm pilots and observers follow their own checklist. So the remote pilot and command follows the Warren checklist. They verify UAS and C2 functionality and say, good to go. They say whether you can fly or not that day. Ensure that the crew has sufficient space to assemble and operate, free from public interference, so they rope off your area. And they view the remote pilot and command safety risk assessment of the flight task, so they review all your checklists beforehand, and they have to be able to understand and evaluate them. When it comes to power supply and fire control, the UAS and the control station batteries are charged and use proper protocols so that you don't have dangerous batteries in the air. They make sure any power cords and charging stations are secure and away from the public, and there are fire management protocols in place. And we have a metal container with wood or sand as a way to contain a lithium battery fire. Make sure you go out and walk around the drone port and look for where we put safety elements. When it comes to weather and local hazards, confirmation with the remote pilots that the forecast is suitable. So winds of 20 knots and higher are not suitable for flight. Make sure the crew is aware of any local phenomena. Gusts. When you fly at the Smiths Training Center, we're between two mountains. We get a lot of gusts. We do get sun glares. We have buildings. We have students, so we have to make sure. Make sure the crew is aware of any obstructions, power lines, telecommunications, or structural features. When it comes to flight profiles and flying operations, make sure the airspace assessment is completed. Check the DROTAMs and NOTAMs. Use flight planning, airspace information. Check the TFRs. Use Lance or other digital notification systems. We use Skyward. Communicate. Air radio serviceable. Make sure they communicate with the flight tower if we're in one of our airport flying days. Launch and recovery areas are set up and suitable, as are emergency landing areas. Lost link procedures are understood and briefed with the air boss and embedded in the control system. Return to base, return to home is placed in there. Emergency equipment is serviceable and checked. First aid kits, other emergency equipment, proper attire and apparatus for safe flight and takeoff and landings. And make sure that your emergency plan is ready to be actioned upon and you know what you're talking about. All this helps our remote pilots, or even helps you as students, understand the need for professionalism, the need for more training, always more training. Even the most experienced of us as pilots should be constantly upgrading our skills in ADM and CRM. So what is the risk management process? Identify the hazards, assess the risks, analyze your controls, make your decisions, use your controls, monitor your results, mitigate your risks, prevent accidents, prevent incidents, and follow the direction of the remote pilot in command if you're crew. And if you're a remote pilot in command flying with other remote PICs, follow the advice of the air boss or the chief pilot or your instructors. Remember the 5 hazardous attitudes of ADM, anti-authority. You can't tell me. All right, I'm not going to read these to you because by this point you all have your Part 107 or you wouldn't be in this course, but follow the rules. They're normally right. Remember the next one is impulsivity, the desire to do something quickly, to not do your checklist, to not prepare, to be in a hurry. Stop yourself. Slow down. Check everything in your control app. Make sure that you have taken the time to get everything right before that aircraft leaves the ground. Check yourself always for invulnerability. Nothing bad ever happens to me. I know it's happened to other people. It wouldn't happen to me. Imagine how much money that guy could have saved if he had, at McCarran, if he had done what he was supposed to do. Remember, it could happen to you. Remember the idea of macho, I can do anything? Trying to impress others or prove yourselves by taking unnecessary risks. Everyone does this. Doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman. We want you to have confidence as a pilot. We want you to have an experience. We want you to grow in confidence over time. But we always want you to be saying to yourself, taking chances unnecessarily is a foolish decision. And we want you to avoid the concept or the hazardous attitude of resignation. What's the use? Something went wrong. It wasn't my fault. Let's go back to our McCarran guy again. Let's go back. It wasn't really my fault. It was all your fault. Okay? It's clearly your fault. You had you were macho. You didn't think first. Then when something happened, you thought it was, the Secret Service did it. No, you did it. All right? You weren't helpless. You can make a difference. You can always make a difference. Don't lose the fact. Things are going to go wrong in aviation. They always do. Maintain your composure. Maintain your control. Have your procedures in place. Have your mitigations in place. You will make a difference. What can we do at Warren to ensure that we diminish hazardous attitudes and make ADM and CRM part of the normative patterns? Well, we do that in these courses. We do that in setting you up to succeed. And we do it through our safety management system. It's in your required reading for this course. Make sure you read it. Make sure you embed it in your practices. Make sure you take it with you to your next employer. Make sure you check their safety management against what you've learned here. And please do me a favor. If you go to work for somebody and they have better safety management systems than we do, come back. Teach us. We're all in this together in this industry. What are the components of our SMS? The safety policies, the safety culture, the safety objectives, the safety risk management process where you go through and pre-plan your mitigations, the safety insurances and the audits we undertake. We bring in other professionals to say we're doing a good job. We promote safety. This entire course is a promotion of safety. When we do demonstrations, it's a promotion of safety and a process for risk assessment and mitigation. So pulling this all together in our safety culture, what do we want to know? It's about maintaining, ADM and CRM are about maintaining situational awareness. That's your competence of what you're doing. Leadership and management principles. And when you take the CRM course, we'll talk about the difference between the two, but maintaining your competence and being in command. Maintaining your competence and performing the shaping factors, your preparation. Maintaining your competence in decision-making. The first best decision you'll make on any given day is, should I fly today? Is it a go or no-go day? Your competence of being able to communicate with those around you and your team, and your ability to work with the team. Because all that comes back to your situational awareness. We cover this in UAS 109, Crew Resource Management, but it's never too early to start thinking about how you're going to be a safer pilot and create a safer crew. I'm Dr. Will Austin for Warren Community College. We'll see you in the next video.